So here at the Socially Used Studio, after every shoot, we sit around in the control room and we talk about what went good, what went bad, and what we could do better in the future. And we realized that we should probably record these things so we can actually remember what we said. And then we realized that this could possibly be good content for the people who view our channel. So come along with us as we learn, grow, and fail, and maybe you can learn something as we learn too. Welcome to the Debrief.
Let's start with how pre-production went, and whoever wants to take it away, take it away.
We were using the same set that we've used a couple of times. We had to change out the painting in the background, which took a little bit of time, but the lighting was pretty close to being dialed in as much as we can without somebody actually sitting on the stage. So that was good. Of course, you have to adjust the table height and things like that, or positioning before when somebody gets there. Jay, do you have any other thoughts on the pre-production?
Yeah, lighting is just different for a person who is a 16 or 17-year-old. I'm not exactly sure how old William is now, but we lit William, who is Tyler's son, yesterday, who is a brunette young man with short hair and is very different than a lady with blonde hair. So the lighting wasn't exact. Sorry, Morgan, I cut you off. The lighting wasn't exactly what we needed, and something changed overnight because Tyler and I worked pretty long yesterday on getting the background to be pretty exact and even, and then when we turned everything on today, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was just like from an Unreal perspective, this is a set that we've used before, so that was really nice to kind of speed that process up. Yeah, it seemed like we had a lot of issues with lighting the background for some reason, even though, like you guys were saying, it was set up the day before. So not sure what that was.
Well, in pre-production about the scripts, these people were really great about sending all the scripts and all the different assets over. So I had all the scripts loaded in. There were some editing changes that I didn't know about that we were able to make. I was able to make those changes really quick because they were all loaded in and ready to go. But then, what was it? Prompter
crashed, right?
Power prompter crashed, and so all those changes that I had made were just lost for about, more than half of the scripts. So I had to go back in and reload them. But because they were all easily accessible, I could just go back down and make the little changes, and that was fine. But having that all preloaded, I think, made everything go fast. Because as soon as she finished with that one, I could just bring up that other one and just go right into it.
One thing we did miss in pre-production was graphics. I found that out kind of last minute.
This morning?
Yeah, Taylor was able to make them, but having that. And I think it's just we didn't look in the right folder or something it was she had it in the script, and we just didn't, somehow her note of it being highlighted didn't get transferred over or something like that.
Yeah, in the scripts, there were little yellow highlighted words that I saw that they were highlighted, but I didn't know what they were. And she said, "Oh, those are things I want to show on the bottom." And we were like, "Oh, she means along the lower third." So we had to go, and Jay had to go, or Morgan had to go in there and create those graphics so he could fire them off whenever it came to that in the script. But then I took those little highlighted things out of the script so that it wouldn't be cluttering up her reading of it.
Okay, I'm back. So this morning, I think she got here around 9, and I think we started filming around 11, which has typically been our go-to time around there. So one of the things that took us such a long time to get ready this morning was she had very white hair, and it's blonde hair, and it's very hard to keep blonde hair. So I'm going to let Andre, the master of keying, take this one away.
So one thing we definitely need to do is buy a blonde wig of actual human hair instead of the blonde wig that we have, so that we can really test, because it's just different the way it interacts. And so that's now a really critical question is, do you have blonde hair? For us to know, just because it changes our lighting. So essentially blonde is close to white, and it's going to reflect any green at all. So it's much more likely to take on the characteristic of a green color, which was challenging. wasn't as challenging as some of the other keying that we had to do, but there was definitely challenge in trying to get it right. Combined with, we had to play with the background, the lighting of that just a little bit, change the painting out. The painting was fine that we had before, but we've already used that one before. So I think that was something I would say about pre-production is we kind of were like, oh, cool, they're using the same Unreal set that we've used before, but we should have been like, oh, but how are we going to make it feel at least something unique about it on this one? So
Yeah, that
One page.
that took us, that added on time trying to change the painting, but in reality, it's not that long if you're not trying to cram it in before a shoot.
well, it worked well because you started searching for paintings, so
Yeah.
I was able to still work on keying while we did that. I learned a new feature in the Ultimate that I've never used before. I mean, I guess I've seen it, but inside the foreground, maybe you can go. Oh, no, let's see. Maybe it's matte. I don't know. But
What
somewhere,
feature are you talking about?
taking the freeze frame.
Oh,
there
yeah,
it is,
foreground.
Yeah, so foreground freeze, FG freeze. So that was cool. I just haven't tried to use that before because I've just been having the talent on, camera while I'm doing it. But we were able to have her just sit down for a second, freeze her, and then I could go ahead and kind of rough in the key pretty
From a
good.
still.
So from a still, right? It's basically just like freeze framing her, but it's still allowing me to do all the settings. So that was a new feature that we used. The key overall, I think we did a pretty good job. So the only thing that I would have done differently is the yellow behind her hair. In my mind, that made sense because it's like, oh, it's blonde hair, a little bit of yellow in the painting, kind of right behind her. That'll kind of hide that better, but
That.
it did not.
That.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah, you
want me to
you
what?
can show it.
Just show.
Yeah, Jay, so here it is. So maybe you could full screen that for a second and just pause it just because when Final Cut's playing, it's a little soft. So, so, I mean, we got her hair pretty great. See if we can find a close-up shot of her as well. But that yellow, there were times when she... well, you know what? It looks great.
Well, the reason it looked great is because Morgan adjusts. So initially, with the way the camera tracking worked,
Right.
it was actually physically correct. Like we were looking into the window,
Mm-hmm.
like you actually would have if you were in that 3D space. But Morgan took the Unreal background and scooted it over to the right, so that she was then in front of a darker space than the window light coming in, or the actual window itself, which is the most difficult
Right.
of all of the spaces to key.
Yeah, we were unable to use. We had a moving shot, but that key, we just couldn't get it to a spot where we felt like it was good. I think, right? We
yeah,
ended up
it's
using it.
still the bright background problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that we want to do. So there's like this conflicting set of ideas where one is you don't want to shoot on something that's super bright because it's hard to key. I realize I'm far away from the microphone. And then the other one is you want to shoot from the shadow side so it stays moody and cinematic. But when you shoot from the shadow side, more times than not, you are going to be shooting at the light source that is creating that
Yeah.
mood.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So that's a thing for us to work on, but
Thanks.
I mean, we still got some great shots out of the deal. So yeah, so summary was her hair. The other thing that was interesting wasn't a keying problem, but she had a solid red jacket, but it had like a tiny texture to it, and it was creating all kinds of weird moire. And it was just like stupid. So it's like, because we tell people like bring solids and whatever, but it's also like, does
Even
it
the
have
texture.
a fine texture?
Yeah.
That's also an issue.
Well,
So.
I think the black jacket that she was wearing looked really good because it highlights her face and hands. So that turned out okay, I think. I guess this might be a good time. We had that image up there to talk about the problem with when we light ladies versus with the lighting kind of clamshell that we had been using with a lot of reflection
Yeah.
and bounce and softness versus the
Yeah, pull up. Can we? Yeah. So here's the thing. So how do we know someone has a wrinkle? Because there is a shadow, right? So it's because of the shadow that we see the wrinkle, and we're moving more into that masterclass look, kind of Rembrandt-y style lighting, catch light in the eyes, but definitely a shadow side. So whenever we create a shadow side, that means we're creating shadows. So she said something that we haven't heard in a long time. She sat down. Now, this was pre-makeup and everything, but she sat down and said, I look old or something like that. And it was like, dang it.
No,
I know.
yeah.
So, I mean, I think she's very pretty. Like, I think we got a pretty look. But it's definitely not age defying, like it's not a look like that. So, we just have to think about our sets and who's going to be on them. Again, I think it's a pretty look, but it definitely created some accentuation, especially in her neck, in some of those places where, just may not feel as good about it. So I think the short answer is we do need to kind of come up with some sets where we think about the lighting, the lighting is motivated a little more, like maybe still a shadow side, but it's a lot more
Straight on
when it's older female, to really make them feel a little more glamorous in their look.
I think, you remember what people used to say, especially girls who would come in here, and their number one thing they would say was, I wish I could have this lighting with me all the time.
Yeah.
Like somehow being able to get that and still keep the mood and still keep the same look.
I am proud that we have our catch light in both eyes, so you get to see that there. That looks really good. Overall, it looks good. The only other thing I'll say is when shadows on skin happen with keying, it tends to go more red. So like if you look at her hands, just hit play, Jay, but see how the insides of her hands are kind of red? They weren't really that red. It's more like, so that was also driving me bananas, but it felt like literally no one else noticed that, but that's kind of all I could look at, was that inside of her hands were not, the inside of her hands were not red. They're just a dark shadow, but it's kind of pushing red. The other thing I did differently on this one is I did boost the saturation, which I haven't done as much. So it's a little richer color than we've had in the past. It felt a little too desaturated without it. So yeah, that's the key. But
look at that. When her hands are open, they're not that red. Her thumbs are in shadow, so they're a little bit more red. But whenever she opened her hands to let more light in, they weren't that red. But yeah, when her hands were split, they were extremely red.
So that's a thing. So I kind of felt like we fixed that when we went away from that phantom LUT and into just the extended video LUT. But I want to do a little more experimenting, because something's kind of making it tend towards red in the shadows. But as far as her individual hairs, for the most part, the only thing I would have changed, you can kind of see it right there, is it's just a little dark in that tiny little triangle of yellow. But there were times when she would kind of bob her head and more of it. So more of that would show. It's subtle, but I mean, like if you look at the green above, you can just see every individual hair, no problem. But that's just that's not a color situation. It's a luminance. It needed to be a little darker. So that is all I have to say about the chroma key. Back to you, Emma.
Okay, that's all he's got to say. Okay, was there anything that we ran into any issues today or anything that didn't go according to plan?
Well, we had a little bit of challenge dealing with there was some thumping sound, and we thought initially that it was she was stomping her feet or something. We had, because of the height of the chair, I like to put something underneath their feet, because she was a little bit shorter than the last person that we dealt with, to keep their legs from hanging down and feeling uncomfortable. So we had some apple boxes under there, some thin ones, and she was an organist, so she kind of was always kind of moving her feet around while she was talking. And so Jay and I had to work out a way, and Andre, we kind of figured out a way to have padding down there, but it was also supporting her feet. But then we kept getting that thumping sound. We couldn't really figure out where it was coming from. I don't know if it was something in the building. We pretty much eliminated the possibility of her stomping on those boxes, or then there was times when she would bring her hand down and hit the tabletop, and so we would have to go back and do a pickup. But I don't know what that other. We'll have to kind of figure out if that continues to happen, because that was kind of a new thing to have a sound like that.
Yeah. Also, I would say we need to make sure, and maybe you did, get her height. but we need to think about that because we could have because we actually had the table propped up for the last guy, and we have an adjustable chair that was also higher. And it's like, wait a minute, we could have not had the table all propped up. Her feet could have just been on the floor, and we could have had the thing lower. So that's just something for us to consider. And we probably need to start measuring out, like, okay, people that are this tall, the chair is on number 4, whatever.
Did not ask for her height, so that's a good takeaway for me.
All right, yeah,
next time I will ask people's heights.
Yeah.
Because that is a good thing to know.
One other thing is she was extremely smart and extremely good in her field. And when she wrote these scripts, we ran into the problem again of somebody. She wasn't doing terrible, but we ran into the problem again of somebody writing to read and writing to write and not writing to speak. So she did a really good job. I'm not trying to say that she was fatigued or that she was stumbling on her words a whole bunch, because she really wasn't. But again, it's delivering that content and using words that people don't typically use in conversation. So I'm really interested in trying to somehow head that off at the pass and maybe talk to people before they come or before they send over scripts and give them that opinion. And maybe we did. I just wasn't involved. I'm not sure, but again, we're running into that problem of somebody writing a script that is for reading and not speaking.
I talked to the client. This is a little weird. So we have our client. The client is then acquiring the talent to come and do this. And the client is picking talent that's experts in their field, not experts in video. I have an opinion now, which is if they send us a script that's a full script, it's probably bad. Like it's probably, it's going to feel robotic. It's not going to feel natural. It's probably going to be very precise, but it's probably not going to be very normal. This is just me talking. It's very much I'm reading something. So I think we just have to realize, I mean, I'm saying 80+% likelihood. I mean, we've had exceptions for sure, but we really want to coach people to less specificity, more points, key things to talk about. The problem is the nature of this, like, credentialed training is there's a lot of guidelines that things have to follow.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, there was some coaching involved. And so maybe we hit that real quick, is just directing. How did that go, Tyler, for you?
Well, and like Jay was saying, she read those things. Like, I mean, she's got a PhD and all this stuff. And so for those words, for her, not a big deal. But like nobody says, additionally, but in writing, you use it all the time. The other thing that people do a lot of times is like they'll list, and we don't ever really talk like that either. So I was actually goofing around with one of the scripts yesterday, kind of seeing, well, if I put the script that we got and then side by side, what would it look like if you wrote it for spoken, to be spoken? And it was very different.
I wonder if we could just get Chat GPT, like give it the script and be like, now rewrite this, but make it in very normal spoken words.
I was really impressed with the way, what's the guy's name that, the guy that, our client that was here, Jared, he has a really great technique for getting them to understand what they're supposed to do. Like, I can read about directing actors, but actors have a craft that they know. You don't tell them what to do, and they know how to make themselves do whatever it is, but he shows them. And I was watching him do it. I'm like, oh no, you can't do that. And I'm like, wait a minute, these aren't actors. So he just showed her, here's how I want you to read it. Blah 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 blah. And then she's like, oh, okay, I can do that. So then she sits down, and then the other thing that they do, which is great, is show that the person themselves how they looked when they did it, and then how they looked after they did it, the way he had showed them. And they go, oh wow, that's a big difference. I looked so dead over here, and now I look energetic. So showing them how to do it is actually very legitimate in this setting, I think.
Yeah.
Seems to work.
That's great.
Morgan, do you have any takeaways for Unreal for us?
Not really in the Unreal, since we use kind of the same set. I will say trying to do multiple roles gets really messy real quick because we're pushing graphics, we're switching shots. So something I'm trying to work on is not lingering on a shot for too long, or kind of keeping the pacing. But I was having to follow along with the script to hit those graphic cues correctly on time.
Right. Which means that you can't stare at the screen.
Right.
And
So
be ready
that's a
to-
little bit of a challenge. And then when
Uh-huh.
we were having the audio issue, trying to manage that in addition to you were picking up editing
Yeah.
all at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And we have an audio engineer for a reason, but sometimes things are different over them listening to it through a network and us being here hearing it directly through the speakers. But yeah, I'm beginning to get a little flustered on, like, it's when somebody's like extremely good and they're like knocking their content out. It's like, oh, well, I'll be over here editing, and when they're done, I'll cut it out. But whenever we're starting and stopping, it's really hard for me to concentrate on editing and catch them making a flub or like messing up and trying to also direct them, and then helping Tyler figure out where we are in the prompter, and then talking to you about the shot we were on, because my attention isn't completely devoted to them speaking at that moment.
When I'm looking at the prompter, and man, when you're running prompter, you cannot look away from it for, I mean, even a second to reach over and get a drink, and then you're like, oh no, they're off. So I'm not watching their actual performance, and no one else has the freedom to just stare at them and listen the whole time.
Now-
even when you're switching, you can't really, because you're kind of thinking about the content, and you can't really watch for performance as much,
You're listening for the words to be able
Yeah,
to
that's
cut.
right. When am I going to cut?
Yeah. Now she got into a groove. And once she hit that groove, and it was easier for me to because what we're doing editing wise, like our entire system is editing live, so that I'm not in here actually doing large edits, but I'm doing pickups, and I'm making sure that angles are changed differently during those pickups so that they feel natural. Now, once that becomes like add a pause here and change this angle, typically I get that done before she even starts the next one. But if the files are longer, they're taking longer to import, and I can get that done, or if they're taking longer and I'm not able to get that done, then it's a lot harder for me. But so there's like two ends, and I just get frustrated, and I end up working through it and figuring it out. And at the end of the day, like I just finished editing everything, so it's really not that bad. But finding that balance is sometimes delicate.
So you finished all editing. It's 5:40, and you finished it earlier because we've been recording for about 20 minutes. Two quick thoughts. One is
Actually, no, I just finished it like 2 seconds ago.
oh, hilarious! You're doing multitasking.
Yeah.
Two quick thoughts. Number one is, however, scripts that are fully written out that have cues are super helpful for us to go.
100%.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is a huge assistance
But-
to us.
The catch to that is like Tyler was having to take those out so that she didn't say them. So we need some sort of way, because that's why I was still having to follow the original script in
On Google Docs on your
So
laptop.
I'm having to scroll separately
Yeah,
from the prompter.
yeah, because you don't see the cue.
Right. Right. And so I would get lost, and then I'm like having to listen to what she's saying to figure out my spot in the Google Doc.
Yeah,
There's
not
probably, I'm sorry.
no. Go ahead.
There's probably a way that we could put that in the teleprompter script that wouldn't be interfere with her ability to read it. So we'll have to figure that out.
That's funny, because what I was going to say is the weird thing about the teleprompter is, and what I'm going to say is wrong, and never mind. Well, you can't necessarily. I literally had a battle with myself, and I was like, well, so what we do is we turn it into black and white on the monitors out there. We still have it in color in here, but the
Yes.
problem is you can't highlight things in here, because out there it
It
becomes
looks
impossible
black.
for her to
Yeah.
read.
Which may actually be helpful if you did it in like a dark blue.
Oh,
color.
that's
But
true.
right.
Maybe
Did
kind
we
of
just
for
figure
her-
out?
for her.
Did we just
Yeah.
figure it out?
And
My
we
brain
put-
is mush.
Yeah, there you go. See, that's why you never should censor that stuff. It's like that actually maybe led to an answer there. That's great.
That's hilarious. Yeah, because we would be able to see it and she wouldn't.
Right. Yeah. Last thing I wanted to say is I think we need to say we value perfection. Like we want it to be perfect and great, but we value momentum over perfection.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we kind of have to go like, okay, look, getting her in the groove and running and her, because once we break that and like cut, sorry, airplane explosion, dogs barking, whatever the thing was, it's like then she's got to stop, rewind, because her brain was already ahead, and that's very disruptive. And so, some of that we just have to realize, like, what's the trade-off here? And
Yeah.
What's that threshold? Right.
Yeah, and sometimes the difficult part is I have a reason that we should stop, and I think that is the bar. Like, this is the only reason we should stop. But Tyler hears something in the script, and he thinks that this is a reason we should stop. And Morgan does something on his side, so that's a reason we should stop. And so sometimes we all sort of have this like different importance level of like, what do we stop for?
Yeah.
So I think maybe we could sort of like get together. I think maybe even coming up with it live, like while it's going, because I don't think it's going to be the same for everybody. But finding, like, really dialing in that level of like, okay, that's a definite reason we should stop her right now is important.
The short answers seem like if it's within the first 30 seconds, we tend to just cut pretty quick and start again.
Yep.
But once it's like a minute and something in, it's like, oh, that's really disruptive to start breaking that rhythm unless the whole thing's only a 2-minute piece or something. But,
and it's feel too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there has to be one person who has the authority to call cut. So, like, what happened was I was watching the prompter, and she said something wrong, and I stopped the prompter, but Jay didn't know that until
nice.
and I didn't realize that he didn't need that part. He needed the next few because of the pickup. So he only needed the end part, and so I stopped the prompter because she said something wrong, and it would have been okay to keep going. But then he should be he's the only one that can get on there. What we've been doing is Jay's the one that gets on there and says go or cut. But so anyway, having that communication where instead of stopping it, I should have said, hey, she messed up a word. Jay could have said, oh, don't worry about it. I just need the last 3 seconds.
But instead, what I said was, Tyler.
That's right.
And then you apologized, but I said, yeah, but I never said that out loud.
Yeah.
So I didn't necessarily communicate that, like was what you were saying is what we needed to do. So it needed to be, I
think for us to say, hey, I think that was a problem. Jay, because he makes that final, cut call. It has to be one person that does that. Oh, and coming back from lunch, we had a nice lunch, and she came back from lunch, and man, when the first she started reading, it was just like it was in the beginning in the morning, and so it took a while to kind of get warmed back up. And I said something about, I asked her, what was your college alma mater, and I was thinking, man, if we had the fight song from that school, and I said it's like with a football game where you run bursting through the big piece of paper. And I said, well, maybe we should have a big piece of paper that you could bust through, and it seemed like that kind of gave her an idea of, oh, okay, I got to have that energy level of, running onto the field. So then she kind of got warmed back up.
She did that.
She do that?
She did a motion like that, kind of like kablamo.
There you go. And then once she got back up to speed, it was just like smooth sailing after that.
And I will say, from a production standpoint, maybe not her, but there's a difference between eating Thai food for lunch and having a healthy salad. Because I'm not tired right now, but man, like when we eat barbecue and Thai food, that is not a complaint because I love doing both of those things. But sometimes when we eat that stuff, I come in here and I'm like, oh, cut, But today I've been like, after a salad, I'm like, I keep going for 10 more hours. That's just, that's not like one of our biggest things is making sure you have an experience while you're here. So having an awesome lunch is extremely important. But sometimes the healthier option is kind of cool too.
One last thing. They're staying in Chattanooga tomorrow, and it'd be cool to be able to say, well, listen, here's some information or something, or here's like a coupon to ride the incline, because they were going to go ride the incline, I think. It'd be fun to have maybe some kind of like Chamber of Commerce sort of mini chamber package to hand them or something, or I don't know what. But,
okay, we've talked through the good, the bad, what we would change, what we've learned. So I think, with everyone's permission, I think we're going to wrap this up. And it's Friday, and we're going to enjoy our weekend. And it was a beautiful, lovely filming day. I think she ended up filming at 11, and then she was done by like before 5. So that was nice. Yeah. We enjoyed that.
One last thing. I will say, I think we dialed in and really hit a home run on our hospitality today, because I heard her husband talk about how nice and how welcoming we were in all different areas of what we were doing, whether it was in here or where we were eating food or even in the studio. I heard it like 4 times, and he was in different areas. So that's a big W in my book.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think the hint to you're doing something great is people come up with what it is you're doing without you having to tell them that that's what you're doing, right? So we're not like, good morning, we hope to be the most hospitable today, So if they just say it that lets us know that we're actually winning. So way to go, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Peace.
That's two fingers.